Welcome to the homework solution tutorial on lesson 1A, the domain and range. The question asks us to state the domain and range for each graph and then tell if that graph is a function, write yes or no. The domain is referred as your x value, which is also your input. The x value can be determined on the x axis. The range is your y values, or the output of your values on the grid. Then lastly, whether it is a function or not. The best part about this homework is that we give you what it looks like visually, and the visual test that you can use is called the vertical line test. What the vertical line test is when you draw a straight line down the middle, and if it passes through more than one point, then it is not a function. So more than one point, it is not a function. When it is one point, then it is a function. Let's look at number one here. Number one, we have a list of values here, list of points. I could make my life easier and just look at all the different points here. I'm now going to give you the values for each one of the points. These are all the points on the graph. Now you can grab the domain. The domain, again, it's all your x values. These are all discrete because they're all dots. We can write it from the smallest value to the largest value. The smallest value for x is -3. Then we have a -2. Then we have 1. You don't have to repeat it because you already have it. And then 4. This is your list of values. So we put this in the fancy bracket here because these are all discrete values. Now we can do for the y values, which is your output. Start with the smallest value first. The smallest y value I see here is -4. Then I see a -2. Oh, that's not 4. This should be a 0. So that should be 0. Then 3. And then 5. Okay. Right? Because if I look from down all the way to the top, from the bottom to the top, it should increase. Then lastly, we have to see if it passes the vertical line test. Here's my straight line. And then I draw it straight down. So it passes if I drew here. It passes if I threw here. It does not pass if I go here. So notice, this does not pass. Not pass. Because the value of 1 for the input has 2 outputs. It can either be a 3 or a -2. That breaks it. So you write no, not a function, because it does not pass. Now let's take a look for number 2. Number 2, we can try to list all the points out here, but this is continuous. So we can still look at all our x values here. If we can take a look, this is made up of so many points of x's right here. And it goes all the way here to what? Looks like it goes all the way to the -infinity, because notice there's an arrow here. And then there's an arrow here as well. That indicates this is the positive infinity side. Okay, we don't write that positive symbol. We can just write infinity. So here we can say the domain goes all the way from -infinity all the way to positive infinity. And we put it in a parentheses because this is open. Next, let's look at our y values. Let's look at we look always from the bottom all the way to the top. If I look from the bottom, we looked at this value here, and it looks like this is -5. Then we look all the way up, and it looks like it keeps going and going and going because of that arrow. So it goes all the way here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, all the way to positive infinity. So the smallest y value that we have here is -5, then goes all the way there to positive infinity. We open it here at positive infinity because it keeps going, but we close it here at -5 because the graph here does touch it. Lastly, we determine if it is a function or not. And again, to determine if it's a function, we can just use our vertical line test. So passes through one point, passes through one point, passes through one point, passes through one point, and we move on. And we saw that this is now a function. All right. Let's look at number 3 now. Okay. Is this a domain? What is the domain here? Range and the function. The domain for this one, we see that we can go all the way here. Oh, is there an arrow? No. Look, it stops here. Right here. Stops here at -2. Then we keep going on the x values. And it goes to here from the 2. So it goes all the way from -2 all the way to +2. And it touches it. Okay, it touches it. It's closed there. That's why we put the bracket, because it's closed there. Then the range. The range is when we look from the bottom all the way to the top. The bottom y value here is 0 and goes all the way up to 4. Does it touch the 0? Yes, so it's closed there. Does it go all the way and touch 4? Yes, so it's closed there. Lastly, is this a function or not? We draw our vertical line down the middle or anywhere we want, and we see that does it pass through more than one point? And it looks like it does. I'm trying to get the line to work. Come on. Look. See? Passes through more than one point. I can show it to you. Here you go. 1 point. Okay. And 2 points. So it does not a function. So the rest are fairly the same process from before. Let's go. Oh, shoot. I forgot I give you the end behavior for number 2. So I saw that it just asked for the end behavior. So the end behavior are referred to the direction of the arrow. So you have 2 end behaviors. You have your x goes to -infinity. This can be seen as your left arrow, because do you see how the left side is when x goes to -infinity? Then you have your right arrow, so x goes to positive infinity. So this can be seen as your right arrow, because it's on the right side, your right arm. Okay. So the left arrow, is it pointing up or is it pointing down? It's pointing up. It's pointing up. That means the y is going towards what when you look up? To positive infinity. Same thing for the right arrow. It is pointing up. So that is when y goes to positive infinity. When it points up, the y is going to positive infinity. Let's take a look here on number 4, because it also gives us the end behavior. Okay. Let me do the domain, range, and function part really quick for you. I'm just going to pause it here. The domain here is -infinity all the way to positive infinity. Let's look at the range. Here it also goes from -infinity all the way to positive infinity. Then the function, it is a function because it only passes through one point. Then let's look at the end behavior. The end behavior, it always follows this format. So this is always the same, because there's a left arrow and there's a right arrow. So I can just grab it here. So the left arrow is x goes to -infinity, which is this one here. This is the left arrow. the left arrow is when x goes to negative infinity. So what happens to the y? Well, it points down. Okay, that is when y goes to negative infinity. This is an arrow. Then the right arrow is when x goes to positive infinity. And then this will point upwards. So when it points upwards, that is when y goes to positive infinity. So y goes to positive infinity. All right. Okay. That's it. 5 behaves like number 3, so I'm just going to give you the answer without an explanation here. The only difference here is that notice that it stops here. The x value stops here when x is equal to 0. Then it goes all the way to x goes to positive infinity. That is why it's closed here at x equals to 0 with the bracket. But here, when it goes to the infinity, it is a parentheses because it is still open. Notice that there is an arrow going up and down. That is the reason why the range will be negative infinity all the way to positive infinity. And like the other problem, it passes through more than one point, so this is not a function. 6 is very interesting because it does start right here and it goes all the way to your left. Don't freak out. Okay, let's make your life easier by just writing down the point. What is this point here? This point here has an x value of 4, and then the y value here is 0. That is the point at this location. Right? This is going to help us because now there's an arrow. Okay, so the domain. Let's look at all your x values. Okay, it can be 3, 2, 1. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, because you see all the arrow goes all the way here, all the way to negative infinity. So if you move your head from left to right, you're coming from negative infinity. Moving your head all the way to the right, it goes and hits 4. Notice that it is open here from negative infinity, but it closes here at 4 because it stops here at that point. It stops here at this point. Okay? If you look at it from left to right. The range, the smallest y value that you see here is 0, and you move your head up and it goes all the way to infinity. We have to close it at that 0 and open it at that infinity. Lastly, we can draw that line straight down. Okay, let's see if I can draw that line down. Yep, there you go. And then this is, yes, it is a function. The last 3. 7 is very easy because it is like number 1, so I'm just going to give you the answer without an explanation. Here, I just give you the points here. Now you can get the domain range very easily. The difference between 7 and 1 is that it is actually a function because let me draw the line down. See? Passes through 1 point, passes through 1 point, passes through 1 point, passes through 1 point, passes through 1 point. Okay, so this is still a function. Let's look at 8. All right, so 8. Let's look at your points here first. Let's just label the points to make our lives a little bit easier. Here you go. Then I'm also going to label one more point, and you're going to see why afterwards. All right. Let's look at the domain. The domain is referred as your x values. Okay, so all the x values here, we can start from -5, and we go all the way here, and it stops at +5. Okay. The question is if it's a bracket or parentheses. Notice that this is opened here at this point because you see how it's not filled in? Here the point is filled in, so it's closed. When it is open, we use the parentheses because it is open. It does not touch that -5. Here at the 5, it's closed. So we put the bracket symbol there. Okay. Let's look at the range. The range are what's the smallest range here is -2. And we go all the way to 2. Do we touch or not touch -2? Well, it's closed here at -2. So we can put a bracket here because it does touch it at this point. So, and then we go all the way up here to that 2. And it does close that. If we draw that line straight down the middle now or anywhere we want, we can see that it does pass the vertical line test. So we said yes. Let's now look at 9. Number 9. Let's look at the domain. If we move our head all the way to the left, we see that there's an arrow here. Okay, this is a left arrow. And there is a right arrow. So the left arrow gives you the domain, goes all the way to -infinity. And then the right arrow is when it goes all the way to infinity. So it's parentheses -infinity, comma, +infinity. Then the range, same thing because it is an arrow pointing down. It goes all the way from -infinity all the way to +infinity. -infinity all the way to +infinity. These are parentheses because it's open. It is a function because if we draw a line straight down, it only passes through one point. And then your end behavior. Let me just grab the template for the end behavior from the other problems. This is the same. You always have this. Okay? So the first one, x goes to -infinity. This is referred to your left arrow. And we see that it goes, F arrow goes to -infinity. So y goes to -infinity. Then your right arrow, it's right here, goes all the way to what? +infinity. Right arrow goes all the way to +infinity. All right, so there you go. Those are all your solution tutorials for all the problems for 1A.